The sea air, once a promise of freedom, now just a dry, salty grit at the back of my throat, clinging like a shroud. It's been weeks, but the taste of that place, the scent of mildewed wood and something far older, far fouler, refuses to dissipate. Every exhale feels tainted, every memory a fresh wound. We went there seeking an escape, a brief respite from the relentless churn of deadlines and expectations, a simple coastal cottage for a handful of friends. We found a cage, and a predator that had been waiting centuries to spring its lock. It had started, as most disasters do, with an innocent desire for peace. Chloe, forever the group's travel agent, had stumbled upon the listing: secluded coastal retreat, vintage charm, unbeatable price. The photos showed a quaint, weathered cottage perched on a low cliff overlooking a gray, turbulent sea. It had a certain rugged appeal, far removed from the manicured resorts we usually gravitated towards. We were all pushing 30, a quartet still clinging to the frayed edges of youth, but increasingly weighed down by the quiet desperation of corporate ladders and crushing student debt. Ben, ever the cynic, had scoffed at the vintage charm, predicting mold and questionable plumbing. Maya, our pragmatic anchor, worried about cell service. Liam, just wanted to feel the salt spray on my face and forget about spreadsheets for a week. The consensus was reached over lukewarm beers at our usual dive bar. Chloe's enthusiasm was infectious. It's perfect. No Wi-Fi, no distractions. Just us, the ocean, and a stack of board games. Ben reluctantly agreed when Chloe promised to bring his favorite obscure craft beer. Maya, after verifying the nearest emergency room was only an hour's drive away, a detail that now chills me to the bone, gave her reluctant blessing. The drive was long, the kind of journey where the landscape slowly strips away its familiar comforts, leaving behind raw earth and sky. Civilization thinned to scattered farmhouses, then nothing but dense, whispering pines. The GPS signal wavered, then vanished entirely, leaving us to navigate by a flimsy printout of directions. Turn right after the ancient oak, Chloe read, squinting at the faded paper. If it looks like it's been struck by lightning multiple times, that's the one. We found it, a gnarled, blackened sentinel standing alone in a field, its branches twisted like arthritic fingers. A gravel path, barely wider than our SUV, snaked off into a tunnel of trees. The cottage materialized suddenly, a silhouette against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. It was older than the photos suggested, the kind of old that sinks into the earth rather than stands proudly upon it. The paint, once a cheerful marine blue, had faded to a sickly pale gray, peeling in strips like sunburnt skin. Windows, small and dark, seemed to watch us from beneath heavy, sagging eaves. Well, Ben said, his voice unusually quiet, it definitely lives up to the secluded part. The air, even before we opened the car doors, was heavy. Not just with the dampness of the ocean, but with something else, a musty organic smell, like old leaves and damp earth, underlaid with a faint, metallic tang. Liam, ever the optimist, tried to ignore the prickle on his neck. Inside, the cottage was a labyrinth of low ceilings and cramped rooms. The air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and something vaguely floral, like dried potpourri gone wrong. The furniture was sparse, heavy, and dark, a hulking wooden table, lumpy armchairs, and beds with sagging mattresses. No modern amenities, no television, no microwave, just a crackling fireplace and a chipped porcelain sink. Cozy, Chloe said, trying to infuse the word with more conviction than it seemed to possess. Maya, already wiping down surfaces with antiseptic wipes, frowned. It's rustic, and definitely needs airing out. We spent the first evening unpacking, the silence of the remote location amplified by the absence of our usual background hum of electronics. We ate a simple meal of pasta, the only sounds the clinking of cutlery and the distant roar of the ocean. When night truly fell, it was absolute. No light pollution, no distant hum of traffic. Just the relentless surf and the wind sighing through the ancient trees. That first night I woke to a sound. A soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. It seemed to come from the wall beside my bed, which faced the main living area. I lay still, listening. It wasn't the wind, nor the house settling. It was too deliberate. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 like a finger drumming. I told myself it was a branch or a loose shutter. I eventually drifted back to sleep, dismissing it as the overactive imagination of someone unaccustomed to such profound quiet. The next morning, the others reported nothing unusual. Chloe was already sketching the coastline. Ben was trying to get a signal on his phone from the highest point in the yard, and Maya was meticulously organizing the pantry. I mentioned the tapping. Ben scoffed. Probably a mouse trying to get laid. Chloe just hummed, lost in her art. As the days blended, the oddities grew. The tapping came again, sometimes from my wall, sometimes from the ceiling, sometimes from other rooms. It wasn't constant, but it was persistent, always in the quietest hours. Then came the whispers, faint, indistinct, like conversations held just out of earshot. They seemed to drift from the shadows, from the corners of rooms, weaving in and out of the ocean's roar. One afternoon, Maya called us into the kitchen, her brow furrowed. "Did anyone move my spice rack?" she asked, holding up a small rack with 3 missing jars. We all shook our heads. She'd meticulously arranged them by alphabetical order. Now the gaps were jarring. "And the salt shaker," she added, pointing to an empty spot on the table where it had been just moments before. We searched the kitchen, then the rest of the house. It was gone. Ben, ever the joker, nudged me. "Looks like the salt-eating mice are back, Liam." But the disappearances continued. Chloe's favorite paintbrush went missing. My worn copy of Moby Dick vanished from my bedside table, only to reappear days later, face down beneath the kitchen table, its pages warped and smelling faintly of brine. "Okay, this is officially weird," Chloe admitted one evening. As we sat around the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, she looked paler than usual. "I swear I saw a shadow move in the hallway. Just a flicker, but it was too quick, too dark." Ben, uncharacteristically, didn't crack a joke. He stared into the fire, his usual bluster deflated. "I heard something last night," he confessed quietly, "like someone dragging chains across the floorboards above my room. I thought it was you, Maya, getting a midnight snack." Maya shivered. "My room is on the ground floor, Ben, and there's no upstairs." A cold dread began to settle amongst us. The laughter grew forced, the conversations shorter. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air. Was this house haunted? The most terrifying moment, for me, came on the 4th night. I woke to a sensation of being watched. Not just a feeling, but a physical pressure on my chest, as if someone was kneeling on me. My eyes flew open in the absolute darkness. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. And then a breath, cold, stale, carrying that same faint, metallic tang, right above my face. It wasn't a human breath. It was too shallow, too ancient. I tried to scream, but my throat was constricted, the sound catching. I thrashed, kicking out, and the pressure vanished. I scrambled out of bed, heart hammering against my ribs, fumbling for my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating an empty room. Nothing. No one. I ran into the living area, shaking, and found Chloe already there, huddled by the dying embers of the fire, wrapped in a blanket, tears streaming down her face. It was whispering to me, "Liam," she choked out. My name, over and over, and I felt something touch my face. So cold. We woke Maya and Ben. Ben was furious. "This is ridiculous. We're spooking ourselves. It's an old house. It makes noises." But his voice lacked its usual conviction. Maya, ever the calm one, suggested we all sleep in the living room together by the fireplace. A childish solution, perhaps, but the thought of being alone in our rooms was suddenly unbearable. We dragged mattresses and blankets into the living room, forming a makeshift camp. It offered little comfort. The whispers followed us, weaving into the sounds of the night. The tapping resumed, louder now, sometimes mimicking a frantic scratching. We saw shadows, undeniable now, darting at the edges of our vision. They were elongated, distorted figures, too tall, too thin. The next morning, the air in the cottage was impossibly cold, even by the roaring fire. Outside, a thick, impenetrable fog had rolled in from the sea, blanketing everything. We couldn't see more than a few feet in front of us. It was as if the cottage had been swallowed by the world, cut off entirely. "I'm done," Ben announced, his face pale and drawn. The bravado was gone, replaced by a raw fear. "I don't care if it's just our imaginations. I'm leaving." We all agreed. We packed quickly, stumbling over each other in our haste. The car, our only link to the outside world, was parked just outside the small, dilapidated shed. When Ben tried to start it, the engine turned over once, sputtered, and died. He tried again. Nothing. Just a weak, pathetic whine. Panic truly set in then. We were trapped. The fog was too thick to walk in, and we didn't know the way. Our phones were useless, no signal. "There must be a mechanic nearby," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. "Near where, Maya?" Chloe cried, her voice rising in hysteria. "We haven't seen another house in 20 miles. That afternoon, the true horror began to unfold. Maya had gone to the kitchen to fetch some bottled water. We heard a sharp, choked gasp, followed by a clatter. We rushed in. She was standing by the sink, trembling, pointing at the chipped porcelain basin. Inside, filled to the brim with dark, brackish water, floated a small, wooden doll. It was crudely carved, with empty sockets for eyes and a wide, unsettling grin etched into its face. It looked ancient, waterlogged, and somehow malevolent. "It wasn't there," Maya whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "I swear it wasn't there." As we stared at the doll, the water in the sink began to churn. Murky bubbles rose to the surface, and the metallic smell intensified, making us gag. Then, the water turned a sickly reddish-brown, like diluted blood, and from the depths of the sink, a low, guttural moan echoed through the small kitchen. We stumbled back, horrified. Ben, usually so grounded, looked like he was about to vomit. "What the hell is that thing?" he choked out. That night, the scratching intensified. It wasn't just a tapping anymore. It was a desperate, clawing sound, coming from within the very walls, from beneath the floorboards. It sounded like something trapped, something trying to get in, or get out. We huddled together in the living room, too terrified to sleep. Chloe began to weep openly. "It's in here with us," she sobbed. "It's not just the house. It's here." Then Ben started to laugh. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was a high-pitched, hysterical cackle, completely devoid of mirth. His body convulsed, his eyes rolling back in his head. He thrashed on the ground, foaming at the mouth. We tried to hold him down, but he had an unnatural strength. He clawed at his face, scratching deep furrows into his skin, all while that horrifying, mocking laugh tore from his throat. "Ben, stop it!" Maya cried, trying to restrain him. As he fought, his eyes suddenly snapped open, fixed on me. They weren't Ben's eyes. They were black, bottomless pits, filled with an ancient, burning hatred. And from his mouth, not Ben's voice, but a low, resonant growl, distorted and inhuman, erupted. "You are mine." A wave of pure terror washed over me, a primal fear that froze my blood. This wasn't a haunting. This was something possessive, something hungry. We managed to drag Ben to a chair and tie him down with bedsheets, his struggles gradually weakening into tremors. He lay there, unconscious, his face a mask of terror even in sleep, his breathing ragged. We knew, with chilling certainty, that he wasn't alone anymore. Chloe, remembering the local lore she'd researched, suddenly remembered something. "The fisherman," she gasped, her voice raw. "There was a legend about a creature, a sea spirit that lures sailors to their doom. They called it the drowned weaver. It collects souls, trapping them in its nets, feeding on their despair. The salt shaker, my book, smelling of brine. the waterlogged doll. It all clicked into place with a horrifying inevitability. This house, this isolated stretch of coast, was its domain. And we, the unwitting tourists, its new prey. We had to get out, even if the car wouldn't start, even without a clear path through the fog. We couldn't stay. Something in Ben told us that. As if on cue, the house began to groan. Not the settling of old timber, but a deep, resonant sound, like the very foundation was being twisted. The floorboards beneath us began to vibrate. The tapping and scratching ceased, replaced by a slow, deliberate thud, 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 coming from everywhere and nowhere. It was like a monstrous heartbeat. "The shed!" Maya suddenly exclaimed, pointing a trembling finger towards the back door. "There's an old fishing boat in the shed. Maybe we can use it to get away from the shore." It was a desperate, insane idea, but it was the only one we had. Abandoning Ben, because we couldn't risk further exposure or drag his convulsing body, was the most agonizing decision of my life. But the blackness in his eyes had already told us he was gone. We scrambled out the back door, into the thick, suffocating fog. The air was heavy, reeking of salt and decay. The thudding followed us, seeming to grow louder, closer. The shed was barely visible, a shadowy hulk in the swirling mist. Inside, amidst discarded nets and rusted tools, sat a small, flat-bottomed boat, its paint chipped, its wood rotting. Pushing it out was a desperate task. My hands were raw, my muscles screaming, but the fear was a powerful motivator. Just as we pushed it free of the shed door, a bone-chilling scream tore through the fog from the cottage. Ben's scream. It was short, sharp, cut off abruptly, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound. My blood ran cold. "No!" Chloe whimpered, collapsing beside the boat. "Oh God, Ben! We have to go!" I yelled, grabbing her arm, dragging her towards the unseen cliff edge. "Now!" The thudding was right behind us now, accompanied by a hideous slurping sound, as if something vast and wet was moving over the ground. I risked a glance back. Through the swirling fog, I saw it. A shape, gigantic, amorphous, glistening wetly, like a colossal jellyfish pulsing through the air. Tentacles, long and slimy, whipped out from its mass, probing the ground, tearing at the overgrown grass. It moved with a horrifying, silent speed. We scrambled towards the edge of the cliff, the boat scraping over the gravel. The thudding grew deafening. We were going to jump. It was our only chance. The sea below was a black abyss, but it was better than whatever was behind us. 1, 2, 3, I yelled, and we pushed the old boat over the edge. It tumbled, scraping against the rocks, then hit the water with a sickening splash. We followed, Maya landing awkwardly, Chloe screaming as she plunged into the icy waves. I hit the water hard, the cold a shock to my system, driving the air from my lungs. The creature's shriek echoed above us, a sound of frustrated rage that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air. I looked up. Through the thinning fog at the cliff edge, I saw a massive, shadowy form, its tentacles writhing, reaching, seemingly trying to grasp at the very air where we had been. We pushed desperately away from the shore, paddling the old boat with our bare hands, our arms numb from the cold and exertion. The creature's cries slowly receded, replaced by the relentless, mocking roar of the ocean. We rode for what felt like an eternity, until our muscles gave out, and we drifted aimlessly in the vast, unforgiving darkness. We were eventually found hours later by a passing fishing trawler, half-frozen, incoherent, and utterly broken. They asked us questions. Where were our friends? What happened? We told them about the house, the whispers, the creature. They listened with a strange mixture of pity and skepticism. They searched the area, of course. Found the cottage, empty. No sign of Ben. No sign of anything unusual, save for a lingering, unpleasant smell, which they attributed to damp and disuse. They called it hypothermia, shared delusion, trauma-induced hysteria. We knew better. Maya rarely speaks now. Chloe has nightmares she never describes, her eyes haunted. And I still taste the salt. The bitter, metallic taste of fear of loss, of an ancient evil that found its way into our lives. The sound of the sea, once a comfort, now brings a cold sweat to my brow, because sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can hear them, mingling with the spray and the roar of the waves, the whispers of the drowned weaver, and Ben's muffled, pleading screams, forever caught in its net. That vacation, meant to be our escape, became our permanent prison. I carry it with me every single day,